Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of So Chatty with Stephen. And standing in for Walter today is Walter. There he is. Just making sure he's awake yet.
I'm more awake today than I was yesterday. But...
Oh, good for you. Anyways, I guess all of the Americans will be recovering from Turkey Day yesterday. Hope you all had a really good...
Hope you got stuffed.
Oh, yeah. Hope you got stuff. Gobble, gobble. Yeah, today was a busy day. That's why I'm drinking water. I dehydrated myself here because I've been putting up Christmas decorations. Christmas, bah, humbug.
You did a nice job.
Oh, yes. Well, he does the exterior lights. It takes, for him, it takes a day and a half to a week. Where anybody else did, it would take them an hour. But it takes me a good half day or more to get all the house decorated. Every year I say I'm going to cut back on the Christmas decorations. And I did. I threw some stuff out this year. I got rid of stuff we haven't used in years, and I looked at it and go, that's junk. Get rid of that. But I made new stuff this year too. So one went out, one came in, kind of a thing. And anyways, I will be taking some video to show you what it looks like this year. I never do anything the same way every year because I forget what I put up the year before and where it went. So it's always a new adventure. My vision for this year probably didn't work out. It never does. I always have this great idea. I'm going to do this elaborate, classy looking Christmas thing. And I end up with rustic. Because, I mean, all the things have meaning to them, for me. And maybe that's the whole point of putting up Christmas decorations. If you do, designer ones, they're sanitized. They don't have any memories attached to them. They're just like dressing a store window. I think most people like to put up things that come from Christmas past, good memories, things like that. And that's the excuse I'm going to use for not having a designer.
Yeah,
Look.
actually, you think you're right. A lot of times you see these shows and they have they thrown out all their Christmas decorations from previous years, and then they get all these brand new ones, and it looks like a store window or something like that. That it's so designer and everything else, and yeah, it looks nice, but does it have any meaning?
But it's sterile.
Yeah.
It looks gorgeous. I mean, you get someone like that Rebecca Robson.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen her channel,
Yeah.
right now, she's been doing for the last month and a half because she gets a lot of views. A lot of views because she's got something like a 2-point-something million subscribers base. She's a professional decorator and has a budget that is unlimited.
Yeah.
I mean, he has like one Christmas tree ornament is several $100s. And she has a tree loaded with these things. It is beautiful. It is absolutely drop dead gorgeous. But she's selling her services as an interior decorator, and it does look like Walter just said. It looks like the inside of a store. But I think this is a good topic to maybe pursue on Stephen and Walter Live this week about, Christmas traditions when it comes to decorating. So think about it for then. Do you get new decorations every year? Do you get partially some new ones to add to your collection? Do you have a huge collection of Christmas decorations? And if you do, where do you put them? Where do you store them? I've always said I'd love to have a house where I had one room that all my Christmas decorations were there, all labeled exactly where they're going to go, and my tree was on wheels, already decorated. Roll it in, shut the door. December 1st, open the door, roll it out. That would be my ideal. And I actually was at some place that actually had that. We'll talk about that on Sunday. I think that'll be a good topic. Along with, that'll be a side topic maybe, because our main topic is going to be all about stalkers.
Mm-hmm. And also, some people, traditional Christmas and stuff like that. Some people seem to be a stickler that everything has to be a certain way for Christmas. They have to have a real tree and fake tree, and they have to have a big tree or thing.
So they're all the things.
And then other people might decide they're not going to have a tree or something like that, and then other people think that that's weird.
And then there's people who, as we get older and our families, you know, are getting older and they have their own traditions and things they're starting with their children, or they're moving away from you and maybe you don't see them as often. Maybe you don't have a lot of people coming over. We don't have anybody coming over for Christmas. So I thought of that today, halfway through, you know, running up and downstairs and in the crawl space and banging my head on rafters to get decorations out, thinking, and who's going to see this except us? Yeah. Why am I going to all this effort? I got a little tree, stick it up, bang, it's done. You know, make sure it's already small enough that I could probably put it away in the crawl space already decorated. You know, glue gun, everything on it, and then roll it out. But anyways, this is not what today's topic is. This is going to be part of what we're going to talk about on Sunday. So think about it, and we'll see what you guys think of all this kind of stuff and what your thoughts are about stocking people. We're going to talk about that too. Okay, moving on to the main event here. All right, so some announcements. Sewing with Stephanie and Stephen, as always, Wednesdays, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Links in the show notes. Hope Air raffle is about to wind up on December the 5th. That's all I'm going to say about it, because I don't want anybody out there to think that I'm trying to guilt you into buying a ticket for it, because I'm not. And it's okay. All right? So, yeah, I don't know. There'll be more about that. If you saw last week Stephen and Walter Live, you heard all about the problems I'm having with this raffle. Okay, moving on. So, starting also on December the 5th, Stephanie and I will be doing it's come now an annual event. This is the third year in a row we do it. We both get the MSQ, Missouri Star Quilt Company, MSQC, Christmas box. And Stephanie and I do it together. Now, we have already pre-recorded the videos, but I'll let you know that when you see them, and we'll do them every 5 days. We do 5 days in a row. So the first one, December the 5th, we'll have packs 1 through to 5. Okay. Then December 10th, that next video, they'll come every 5 days, will be 6 to 10, etc., right up to Christmas Day. We have already pre-recorded them, but we'll release them on those days, on the 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So if you don't want a spoiler, okay, then I guess the best thing for you to do would be to hold off opening them until we open them. So you could probably open days 1 through to 5 before it goes to air, but from there on in, you know, if you don't want a spoiler, you might want to wait until 5 days later to see the next 5. That's really up to you. Okay, I know there's people out there.
Wait a minute. If you're going, when are you airing the first 5?
December 5th.
Okay, so those 5 days have already passed.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so then they stop, and then they go to the next one. You're airing when?
December 10th. Well, okay,
Yeah.
I guess I see where you're going with this. Yeah, okay, never mind. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess it wouldn't be a spoiler alert because, you know, the 6th comes up and you can open it on the 6th. So, well, what will be the fun part is how we react, because we rate each of the gifts, like whether we go, yay, we're excited, don't like that. And then we pick our favorite one from each set of days. And then at the end of it all, we pick our favorite out of the whole batch. So, and there's some fun along the way too. There's some things that I'm sure you never thought that some Christmas items could be used, or some sewing items could be used for. But I'll show you this. There's one in particular that's a little naughty. Anyways, that's enough about that. So that starts on December the 5th. Okay, Pop-Up Sew Day, the Christmas edition. Yay! It's going to be a little different from the usual Pop-Up Sew Days because it's kind of a cross between a Pop-Up Sew Day and one of my retreats, because there will be prizes. However, the prizes will be patterns, and I have all kinds of patterns. Some of them are ones I have purchased. Many of them are freebies that I have scoured the internet for to find the best Christmas patterns that are for free. Now, you may have already done that. Okay, sorry about it. But the likelihood of you finding all the ones that I found, maybe a couple of them. But, you know, I purposely tried to look for ones that were a little bit more obscure. So that will be during the day. Throughout the day, we'll be drawing for those. And if you would like to show off a Christmas creation, i.e. a quilt, an ugly sweater, some paper crafting of some sort, anything that you've made either this year or in Christmas past that you like to bring out every year at Christmas or something like that, then we're going to have a show and share. But we'll have the show and share throughout the day. It won't be at a specific time. It'll be basically, I'll say, okay, let's have a show and share. Who's got something to show and share? And we'll pick 2 or 3 people at a time to do that. So that's how that will work. There aren't any presenters or anything like that. You'll be working on whatever you want to work on, just as you normally would in a pop-up sew day. The only difference is that this one has the prizes and the show and share. And if you want to get in the festive mood, you can wear an ugly Christmas sweater. I hear it's a thing. First of all, I don't wear sweaters of any kind because although I'm very lean and tight, sweaters make you look fat. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. And I don't like ugly Christmas
I used to wear sweaters, like
and they were ugly.
Not ugly sweaters.
You had ugly all year round.
But I don't know, as I've gotten older, I just don't seem to feel comfortable in sweaters anymore.
Well, it's also, they're hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're old men. We get hot all the time. If we were an old lady, we'd be getting cold all the time. But we're old men. We get hot. So, yeah. But feel free. If you've got an ugly sweater you want to wear for fun, go ahead. Mm-hmm. If you want to wear funny little antlers on your head, go for it. Sky's the limit. Maybe bring something festive to nibble on. We're having a Christmas party, okay? And too, quite seriously, the other reason I'm having this is, well, I'm having this for 3 reasons. One I've just stated. It's Christmas time. We're having fun. The other reason I'm having is because there's a whole bunch of people that I see on here on a regular basis who have Christmas birthdays in there. Like one of the ones you well know, Stephanie, she has her birthday in December too. So we're kind of making it festive for all the December birthdays kind of a thing. People that, because December babies get shortchanged, especially ones that are born the week of Christmas or whatever. People double up on their gifts like, oh, this is your birthday present and your Christmas present. Kind of getting ripped off, So we're celebrating that as well. And the third reason why I'm having it is because, and this is a little bit more serious, there are a lot of people in the quilting community. We are an older community, and a lot of people are alone at Christmas. Like their families are far away. They've lost a spouse, something like that. And so we're trying to take one day and bring some Christmas cheer into everybody's lives. So that's on Saturday, December the 7th. Next week, I will have the Zoom link in my show notes for all my videos that go up next week. And I will be sending out to those people on the mailing list the Zoom link as well. So I hope to see many of you if you can make it. Now, I know it's a busy time of the year, and you might not be able to make it because you're doing Christmas things. But that's okay. If you're not, join us. All right. And one other announcement before we get into the main event. And this is tentative. But do you remember when we used to do the social? And, well, we kind of let that lapse. But we've decided to do a special Christmas edition of the social. And we're thinking that that's going to be on Thursday, December the 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. There will be announcements on my channel, on Stephanie's channel, and on Ross's channel, Quilt Meets World.
Yeah, it's not set in stone as to the date.
We're waiting for Ross. Yeah. We're waiting for Ross to give us the blessing here. So, but anyways, and if that date doesn't work, we will find a date that does work. So we are going to do it. And we're going to do something a little different this time. We're going to talk about our favorite YouTube channels that may not necessarily, but could, involve quilting or sewing. Because I watch a lot of other channels that have nothing to do with quilting and sewing.
In fact, I mostly watch channels that have nothing to do with quilting.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about those, why they're ones that we really like. So you may find a few things you've never heard of before that you may want to check out as well. What I think would be really fun is if we put up the ones we absolutely hate and cut them up. But that one, I've been told that isn't nice to do. Okay, I guess. I guess I wouldn't want somebody to do that with my channel. But, it would be a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
so my first one on the list is the Idiot Quilter. I absolutely hate it. And
did you say something?
No.
I didn't hear a word you just said. Okay, enough to do about nothing. Let's get into the gingerbread house. All right, last week we went over the instructions and we showed you doing the first piece. And then our plan was that Walter would do half of the pieces, I would do half of the pieces. We would do videos of it and fast forward them and everything like that. And actually, that was a stupid idea for a couple of reasons. One, once you've done a couple of the pieces, you don't need to watch the rest of them because they're all done in the same way. So kind of a waste of your time. Two, they take a long time to do. So even though in my mind I'm thinking when I'm editing I'm going to do fast forwarding on it, like speed it up, and I have on the ones that you will see, still, it can be really boring. And three, Walter did it.
No, it's not that I didn't want to do it. It's just that I'm a bit of a procrastinator, so. And Steve, a bit of a gung-ho, and he's already had most of them done by the time I was even thinking of doing.
Yeah. So anyways, I said, well, let me finish it. And it's probably easier because if I can put it on camera because I have the equipment for all of that. And, heaven only knows Walter'd have to find his embroidery machine. It's probably in one of the hills that are in his room, somewhere in there. Oh,
I need to do some. I keep saying I need to do some embroidery and never seem to find time to do it. So.
Okay, I know before I even ask this question, he's going to get pissy with me, and I'll say, so what the hell have you been doing? He's going, well, I've been trying to plan this trip to Holland, and blah, 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 and I had to put up the Christmas tree lights, blah, 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 and I had to buy soil from Amazon, blah, 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 and I had to get the green peppers transferred, the lettuce thinned out on the grow lights, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to ask.
I don't move too quick.
No kidding. Should have called you sloth. Anyways, so yeah. So
I had to figure out how to get rid of my snow tires. And,
oh yeah, see, I knew you'd have it.
And I had to put my snow tires on. And
I just decorated an entire bloody house this morning. I made more trees on my 3D printer. I've got pieces cut out.
Oh, but you're Mr. Like
runner.
You do everything. Blah. You're like real.
Well, I guess a woman's work is never
whereas
done.
I fart around on the computer and do stuff. And
yeah, literally. Don't go into his room. It's not just a hazard going across the floor, but the smell. No.
Oh, give me a break. Not like your place doesn't smell.
It doesn't. It's as fresh as spring. Okay, we digress again. Let's get to the main event here. All right, so last week we went over the instructions with you, and we told you basically to ignore them. Because in our opinion, we think that the companies that put out those instructions and put a whole lot of useless steps and a whole lot of extra material that they want you to purchase is just a selling technique. And we do it the way we do it, that we showed last week, and it works out fine. Not a problem.
There are alternatives to what the company tells you to do. A lot of the stuff that they show you what to do is basically a product.
Yeah. And once you've done one of these things, you will learn very quickly the shortcuts, for lack of a better term. You will figure out what works for you with it. Some people, okay, one of the things, we're going to go over some tips and tricks when you're doing this kind of thing today, but one of the things I want to speak to right now that comes up is a lot of people get discouraged with embroidery projects like this when they see how much it's going to cost to make. Yes, there is a cost involved, but it doesn't need to be that expensive. Because you have to keep in mind the stabilizers you're usually buying them on a roll, and you're buying a lot more than you need for one project. So, a roll of stabilizer is going to do many, many projects. So that's that price. Thread, actually, embroidery thread is actually cheaper than quilting thread. Like if you,
Yeah, but you need more colors of
well,
it.
you need more colors. However, don't get discouraged. You don't have to have over 600 colors like I do
No, you
because
may
I'm
just end
obsessive.
up buying them for a specific project,
Yeah,
and then that's how you add to your collection.
and that's probably the best way to do it, so you don't have an initial outlay of money for it. But embroidery threads tend to be about half the price than, say, like Aurifil. So don't use Aurifil. Use Floriani, use Isocore, use Super B from Monfil,
From
because that's
monfil.
what Walter uses all the time.
Yeah, and the Super B is actually pretty.
3.99 a spool.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So I mean, you can't go wrong with that.
And you can buy when they have them in stock, you can like I think they have them in stock now. They have like a special where you buy 50 different colors for 85 or $90 or something
Yeah,
like
they're
that.
running a special right now on that. I don't know if it's just for today, Black Friday, or if they are extended. They usually has it for more than one day. So yeah, so you don't have to, suddenly worry about. I mean, also you have to take into consideration that you've just spent a lot of money on an embroidery machine. So, do your research on what these things cost. But it doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg once you've got the
Yeah, but
machine.
if you really think about it too, if you just do a quilt, that's an
Well,
expensive
yeah, or any kind of sewing.
prospect.
Any kind of sewing is
Like
expensive.
you've got a lot of fabric you got to buy, and then you
Mm-hmm.
got batting, and you've
Got
got
thread. You got
thread and all other stuff. So that's not exactly a cheap
no,
project
no.
either. So
But I have seen people say, "Oh, I never realized this was going to cost that much money to make." Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. So whatever.
and not only that, a lot of times like the thread, for instance, actually 1,000 meter spool, I think of Loriani or whatever, what you get is actually got a lot. You actually can do a lot with that thread before you run out of
Yeah,
it,
it lasts
right?
a
So
long, long
even
time.
though you might have to buy a whole bunch of different colors or something like that, it's an initial outlay, but it will allow you to do a lot of different projects with that.
Yeah. So yeah, don't worry about that. Now, so we showed you last week one piece. Here is, let me get this up on the screen. Here are some more pieces. In total, this project has 18 separate pieces. I think there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11 of the 18 pieces here.
Yeah, in this example, you're using what, four or five different colors
No, I'm not even that. I'm using a white, I'm using a brown, I'm using a blue, and I'm using a pink. So there's four
and a
colors.
red.
Oh, okay, five colors then. Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
so that this is an example where you're using five different colors.
Yeah. So these are what the pieces look like. But I have finished them all. Next week we will show you how to assemble it. We won't show you that this week, but we want to go over some tips and tricks. But before we do that, I'm going to insert the videos of some of the pieces, and there is some commentary, and then I speed them up uh, for the various things that might happen that are a little different from one piece to another piece. Like, for example, those white pieces you see there, those are all freestanding lace, whereas the ones with the brown are freestanding applique. So I'm going to insert that video that I made in here, and it was probably about 20 minutes or so on that. If you are getting bored and it, just fast forward to the end of it, and we're going to come back at the end of that, and we're going to talk about things that you might want to keep in mind, some tips and tricks as well. Okay, so I'm going to work on my second piece now, and I'll put this at fast forward. It looks very much like the first piece that we did, but this is just the bottom sidewall number 2, and the difference between it and the first one that we did is where the buttonettes are located. The buttonettes for this one, for assembly purposes, are located on the right side, whereas the first piece that looks very much like this, they were located on the left side. So I'm going to set up the machine for this, and I'm just going to move the camera so you can see it. There it is. And the first thing is, now last time I made a little bit of an error. I jumped the gun. It wasn't really a serious error, but I had
it stitch on top of my background fabric first before I actually laid down the actual cut line. Now I've got white thread in here this time. I don't want to, I want to make sure that the white thread does not poke through. And let's put down my, through the other stitches. The black was okay, but I'm going to use white. Now you're not going to be able to see this very well right at the moment because I'm white on white. I also don't think I mentioned that last time. My stabilizer, I did say, is water soluble. I'm using 2 layers, and that's usually enough for something like this. But if you find your design puckering at all, stop your machine and float another layer of water soluble stabilizer underneath the hoop, and that should solve your problem. But for this particular pattern, it seems to work fine with 2 layers. So it has drawn, and I know it's very difficult for you to see, but it is not drawn. It is sewn, and it's going to finish it, the outline of where I need to lay down my fabric. And now it's just doing the windows on here. And as I said, this piece is exactly the same as the first piece I showed you, with the exception of the buttonettes are on this side instead of this side, and that's important for the assembly. So we're just finishing up the window, and then I can lay down my fabric. And then basically, it's going to be the same as the first one. Once my fabric gets tacked down, and I'm just lifting that, move the thread tail out of the way. You want to make sure you cut a big enough fabric to cover everything. And away we go. So this is now the tack down, cut line tack down stitch. I use that as my guide for trimming away the fabric and then letting the rest of this do its thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it set up for this, and I'm going to put this on fast forward so you can see this one stitching out, but it's very much the same as the first one. So there's not a heck of a lot that you need to see here. Okay, so this next piece is a little different from the other two we've already done. This piece, as you can see, goes in the hoop this way, sideways, and it needs a bigger hoop. This takes the next size up, which is the 20B on the Janome 550E, in order to fit this. And you will find that sometimes the pieces do change their hoops depending on how big they are. So basically, we're going to be doing the same thing as we've done already. So I'm not going to record this all the way through, but I am going to get it started once I get my camera lined up here. And first thing it's going to do is draw out the little side of the house, the placement stitch. And this, of course, again, I'm using white on the water soluble, so it will be difficult to see. And the background for this will be the same color as the backgrounds that we've used for the other two pieces, the tan, the gingerbread like look. And of course we will have to cut it out because it's a piece of applique as well. So it's now ready for that next piece. We slide it under here, making sure we cover all that stitch line. That's what it's for, the placement stitch. And start the machine up and it will sew this out. And then we'll take it off the machine and we will trim away the fabric we don't need. Now in this piece, we're going to be using the red fabric for the door, and we may be using the white fabric as well for part of the snow, but by the looks of things, I think the snow is all done as freestanding lace. So we'll just let that finish this, and then we'll come back after I have cut out the piece and let it start up its embroidery. And as I said, I'm not going to record this from beginning to end because it gets a little monotonous. You've seen it before, and I will speed it up. Now, there are a couple of things I want to point out about this particular piece. It did do the line, so I knew where the placement line, so I knew where to put the red fabric for the red door, but I did have to cut out this little part here, which will be eventually filled in with probably white thread for the window, just like it did on the larger side pieces. And that's why you want to have duckbill applique scissors that have a really sharp point to them, because that's a tiny piece to get into and you need the points to do that. So now it's going to carry on with the sewing. It's going to sew the buttonettes around here and work on all the other pieces. So I'll let that go for a bit and we'll come back when the whole piece is done. Now at this point it's going to do some more of the embroidery around the door frame in the pink, but you'll notice there's a bunch of little bits and pieces of thread on here, and I don't want those getting trapped underneath my needle because it might cause it to pop, might cause some of these little pieces to pop up through the satin stitches, and that would look bad. So I'm just taking a sticky roller, a lint brush or a lint roller, and that just picks up all the little pieces up here, and that cleans it right up real quick. So now we can carry on with our embroidery. I just had a little accident and I wish I'd caught it on film for you or on video for you because I did something I told you never to do, and I did it anyways because I got overzealous, and that was I thought I just trimmed without stopping the machine one of the little thread tails, and when I was doing it I got too close to the needle came down, hit my scissors, and the needle broke. Now luckily that wasn't my finger because it could have been. So you should never do that. So, do what I tell you, not what I say. Also, for those of you that are interested about the Janome bobbin that I'm using, if you have a Janome machine, the bobbins have dots on them for different applications. I am using the red dot bobbin, It's the one that has the average tension. The yellow dot bobbin is higher tension and is one that you might want to use if you were doing something like freestanding lace with no fabric at all underneath it. But for this purpose of this, or for this project, the red dot works fine. So we'll let it carry on with what it's doing here, and I'll come back to it when we get closer to the end. So we're on the very last color right now, and that's just the window, and it's done in blue. So we'll let that run. This one took over 50 minutes to create. So as I've said before, this is not a fast process, as you can see. But the end result is well worth it. So we'll let this one just play out.
So in this particular section, we're going to do some snow. And the snow is all freestanding lace, and I'll be putting it with white thread. I'll be creating it with white thread. But here's what it looks like in the instructions. I know it's difficult to see because it's very faint, but that's all we're doing right now. And this process takes only about 24 minutes. But as I said, it's all freestanding lace, so there's no applique involved whatsoever. So you see I've got my white thread already loaded into my needle, and I am using one of the smaller hoops for this one because that's what it called for, the 14B if you have a Janome machine. And we've got 2 layers of stabilizer, of washaway stabilizer. Now you might, in some cases, because we're doing freestanding lace, if it looks like it's going to pucker up on you, the stabilizer, you may want to float some pieces of stabilizer underneath that. But we're just going to leave it and let it do its little thing here. And yeah, we'll come back near the end and take a look at the final product.
So as you can see, we're finished printing out this piece, and it's all freestanding lace, as I said before. So I will rinse out the stabilizer and let it dry, and that part is done. From here on in, all the other parts are done in basically the same way. So we're not going to bother spending time showing you what those look like because you've already seen what they look like. When we have everything sewn out, we'll come back and show you how to assemble the windmill gingerbread.
Okay, so it's kind of one of those things when you sit there and you watch it doing its thing, you get mesmerized with it. When you first get an embroidery machine, you will sit there and watch it for hours. Of course, that's not such a bad thing. So one of our tips is going to be this. Do not leave your machine for long periods of time unattended, because that is when your machine wants to do stupid machine tricks. It will have a thread break for no apparent reason. You'll have a bird's nest, which can be disastrous. We'll talk about that in a minute. And it always happens to me if I turn my back on it and I run upstairs or something while it's working, think, oh, this is going to take 20 minutes to do this piece right now. I can just let it go and do something else. No, it never works out that way. Just a word to the wise. If you're planning on multitasking, okay, don't, because you'll get frustrated, because it will do something when you've got your back turned. Or maybe it's just me. Machines hate me. I don't know. Now, that doesn't mean to say you can't do some other kind of sewing if you have a standalone embroidery machine. If you have a combo machine and that's your only sewing machine, then no, you can't. But my sewing machine just sits opposite of my embroidery machine, and while it is working on a long piece like that, I can be doing some other project where I'm using my sewing machine for it, and still be there and keep an eye on it. But that's just something that happens with machine embroidery. Okay, so let's talk about a bird's nest. You will get a bird's nest. It can't be helped. And you're going to go, well, why am I getting a bird's nest? Well, There are many reasons for the bird's nest, but the main...
And what is a bird's nest?
A bird's nest is where it will suck down your thread and get it wound around your bobbin, and then it starts to pull your piece down into the little hole down in there. Usually at that point, your machine makes a horrible noise and stops. And then you got to try and get it released from that,
because it holds your hoop down.
Yeah,
right?
it holds your hoop down.
And you're stuck. It's stuck. And sometimes it'll pop your hoop.
It sometimes can, and I had that do this, not on this project, on another thing I was working on. It did it. And that's the first time I've had that happen to me in a long, long time. But you see, like I go back to listening to your machine, being with it. You will hear it when it's going to do this. It's going to make a... You'll get used to the sounds your machine makes. And you will get to know the bird nest sound. Now, I can't describe it for you, and for every machine, it might be slightly different. But
you'll just suddenly know that it's doing something it's not supposed to be doing.
It makes sort of a weird noise, and you're thinking, what's going on with this? It sounds like the bobbin's jumping around, and your bobbin probably is jumping around. It's probably partially out of the case or at a weird angle, because that thread that it's pulled down into it and got into a bird's nest is wrapping itself around the bobbin and tangling it all up, and then the bobbin can't move, and then that's when your machine will stop with that. So how do you get freed from that without taking off the hoop? Well, let me show you. I just have to reach in my drawer for my handy little...
Yeah, you'll find that
tool.
if you try and release your hoop from your machine, it's stuck right onto your right onto where the hole goes, where the needle goes down.
Your stabilizer and possibly your fabric have been partially pulled into the little needle hole in the needle plate. So, can you rescue it? Yes. The first thing you don't want to do is try to force the hoop off the machine, because it will pop the hoop. And
once you pop the hoop, you have to start all over.
You have to start all over. What you do is you get yourself a set of these. You can get them on Amazon. They're basically, these are seam rippers. They have a little blade. They two sizes of curves. This little, I got them in these nice little cases.
You can get various different brands of it. I bought a different brand than what he has. And they works in a similar manner.
Just look, there's no real name for these. They're called seam rippers, pro seam rippers. What this one say? It came in this nice little case, and it came with some extra blades and all of this.
Yeah, he got the super duper one, and I got the cheapo model. But they both work the same.
And this was not very expensive. This was I think it was $11.99. Now I've had it a long time. It may have gone up, but it's not. It's under $20.
Yeah, I can't remember what I paid for the ones that I did, but I didn't. They weren't very expensive, but they didn't come in the fancy case. So
the beauty of these is actually what I wish is that I wish they had a longer handle.
Yeah,
I wish I had a handle double this size, because what you do is you lift up your hoop gently enough that you can slide this laying flat.
And make sure your needle's out of the way.
Yes. Make sure you've got your needle up. Now, that's a good question. You may not be able to get your needle up.
Yeah, well, okay, if you can't, then you do your best to...
That's a very, very severe problem. Usually you can get your needle up from that and raise your presser foot as well. Lift up the edges of the hoop without popping it, just doesn't have to be up very high, just enough that you can slide this under and sort of feel for where that knot is and get it into this little curved blade that you see here, and you kind of saw through it. And gently, and try not to cut the fabric. If there should be a little bit of leeway, you just want to cut the threads. And it doesn't usually take too much if this is sharp, and it'll go kind of like boing, and you'll know it'll be freed. And so
you can also use, if you don't have one of those, one of these, you haven't had a chance to buy one yet, is if you have a very, very sharp kitchen knife.
Yes.
But it has to be very sharp.
Like really sharp, probably like those new ones Walter just bought.
You can use something like that, or another knife that's very, very sharp.
Yeah. So what you're trying to do is have your knife blade as flat on the bed of the sewing machine as you can get it, and then just gently saw through it. And it doesn't take much. If your blades are sharp, it'll boing it out.
Yeah, because those are almost like razor blades.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And then what you do is, then you can remove the whole hoop. You're not taking the hoop apart. You're just removing the whole mechanism off the machine. And you will look down in your bobbin case and you will see your bobbin's got your top thread all wrapped around it. And it may be also wrapped under a part of the machine you can't see. So you'll probably need to take off your foot plate. And then you take out your bobbin, untangle it. Open up the foot plate, pop it off, take out the bobbin case, and this would be a really excellent time to clean it. Okay, get in there and pull any little dust bunnies out and everything. Give it a drop of oil where you should, on the wick. Okay, give it a nice little wipe down with that. Make sure there isn't any strands of your thread other places, like sometimes they'll get caught in the thread cutter as well, the little blade that's right there. So clean that out as well. And then put everything back together. And then put in a new bobbin.
Also, do you try and cut some of the threads off the bottom where the bird's nest is too and stuff?
Oh, well, yeah, I was coming to that.
Oh,
but
okay.
Put in a new bobbin, and this is good if you're using pre-wound bobbins. Okay, the reason is if you look at that bobbin, if it's been a severe bird's nest, there's been tension on the threads that went around the bobbin, and it's warped the actual threads the way that it'll look kind of like an oval instead of a round. Well, that's going to cause you problems because your threads are not going to come off evenly on that. So I pop in a new bobbin, and depending on how severe that is, I'll either, if it's not that bad, I'll use it in my domestic sewing machine to use it up. But if it looks really bad, I just pitch it into the garbage. Okay, but don't try to reuse it because you're just going to get a bird's nest.
You may just
again.
get in the second bird's nest.
Yeah, with it all.
And ask us how we know.
Yeah, because that's how we learned. That's why we're sharing that information with you. Okay, so Walter just mentioned, so what do you do with it on the underside? Because there may be a clump. Okay, there's a couple of things you can do. You can take a pair of scissors and just very carefully trim off some of that. You don't have to worry about trying to remove the entire bird's nest, but if you've got a lot of loose threads there, a lot of loops and stuff, just trim them back. Now, one of the things that does a good job of that is one of those little electric seam rippers, which are also commonly known as a hair trimmer. They work pretty good for this too. But again, whatever you do, be very careful that you don't pop your hoop.
And be careful that you don't cut into your project.
Yeah, into your project, because then you're going to have to start all over again. So you've done all that. You remount the hoop. You rethread your machine. Rethread your machine from the beginning. Okay? You may have got a bird's nest because your thread started to shred. It will. You're using the right needle in the whole bit, but for some reason, it may have flipped out of the take-up arm, but you can't see that on the machine. And it may look like it's doing okay. And then what happens is it's getting caught and there's friction and it's making the fibers of the thread split because there's strands that are wound around to make the thread. And that may have caused the bird's nest. Okay? So
you may also want to examine your needle. You may want to put a needle.
Your needle might be warped.
Because your needle could be warped too.
Yep.
So.
Because if there was enough tension on that when it happened, it may warp the needle. So yeah, you may want to replace the needle. Do you have to do that every time? No, take a look at it. And
look at it. If your needle looks okay.
If it looks okay, then don't worry about it. But if it looks like it looks a little wonky, change it. Change it. Needles aren't that expensive. Okay, so you've put the hoop back in, you've cleaned it all up and everything, and you've rethreaded your machine. So you should be able to just push start and it'll pick up where it left off. However, it might not. It may have asked you, especially on, I don't know how it works on other machines, but on the Janome, sometimes they'll come and say, turn your machine off. So like it'll say, raise the needle and turn your machine off and then turn it back on. Well, when you turn it back on, it should remember where it left off. They all have a resume feature that's built into them. and it'll go back to the spot it started, well, where it thinks it finished. You should back it up a little bit, a few stitches.
Actually, what I always did was move it forward a few stitches. It might miss a few stitches, but then if you back it up a few stitches, it may redo the bird's nest if it goes back over that spot.
No, it won't.
Okay, fine.
No, I have to disagree with you on that.
Okay.
I always back it up. I don't have any problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's done more than I have, so.
Yeah. Back it up. Back it up. Only a few. Like, take a look at it. You'll see where the stitches don't look right. And don't worry, if there's stitches there that don't look right, you back it up to where it looks like it started to do that and continue from that point. It'll cover those up. You don't have to worry about that, because your needle on those machines can go through many layers more than that of thread. So don't worry about it. You don't need to cut out the stitches that are there. You can just carry on with it. So that is one of the most common problems, especially when you're doing freestanding lace or freestanding applique, as we are in these projects, because there's a lot of stitches. And you might want to run your machine at a slightly slower speed when you do these. I run mine at the slowest speed for all projects. Walter runs his at the highest speed for all projects.
No, not necessarily. I sometimes slow it down to 600 or something.
I mean, the machine will slow itself down at certain junctures in the stitching program.
Yeah, I mean, all the if you have it set at 800 or something like that, which is the maximum, or 860 or something like
for
that.
the Janome.
For the Janome 550E is the maximum speed. If you have it set to the maximum speed, doesn't necessarily mean it stitches at that speed. It stitches at that's the top speed it stitches at. But a lot of these projects will slow down the stitching for certain parts of the project. But that's based on however it's been designed.
So basically, that is the number one problem you may run into with any embroidery project, is the bird's nest. Okay. Now, some other problems you might have, which are more user error than machine error. One of those might be if you're looking at your, let's say halfway through your project, you needed to put in a new bobbin. Okay. Now, if you missed a step in the threading of your bobbin, you thought you hooked it under the little bracket that's there. I don't know what they call that, the hook. I don't think that's the hook. The hook is something else. But anyways, if you're looking at your stitching when it first gets going and you're seeing your bottom thread from your bobbin coming to the top, and the best way to see that is I always sew with a white bobbin no matter what I'm doing. So I know when this is a problem, because suddenly I'm sewing with my top thread is red and I'm not seeing red, I'm seeing white. And tension problem, okay, is popping up. Now, do not touch your tension. What this means is you've probably threaded it incorrectly, and it's easy to miss that little step where it goes under. It might have slipped out, or it may have just slipped out because you didn't have a long enough end or something like that. Stop the machine, take the bobbin. You don't have to take off the plate or anything like that. Just pull out your bobbin, rethread the bobbin, drop it back in, and make it pay close attention that you've got it where it's supposed to go.
I would also recommend doing your top thread too.
Yes, probably that would be a good idea too. Like rethread your top thread too. And I live on the edge, so I mean, do what we tell you to do. Don't do what I actually do sometimes. And that should solve the problem. And back it up. Back the machine up before you start stitching again, and it'll go over that spot and you won't see those white threads or whatever color was in your bobbin. Okay, that'll be fine. You don't have to start the project all over again. Okay, here's another user error. So you've been stitching along and you're having fun, and this goes for any kind of project you're doing, and you forgot you put the wrong thread color in. I keep a little piece of paper near me on a new project that has a lot of thread changes, and if I've gone in and I've picked my own colors for it, I didn't follow the colors in the pattern, I have to keep a list of what colors I am using. And there have been times when I have just something distracted me. I'm threading the machine and I've put in the wrong color. And after about 2 minutes, 3 minutes of stitching, I look down and go, uh-oh, that's the wrong color. You don't have to scrap your project. Stop the machine, cut the thread, rethread the right color, back the machine up to where it started doing that, carry on. It'll go over the top of it, no problem.
I've had done that before when I've been using non-standard colors. Like, I mean, the machine would projects often suggest certain colors, and I sometimes don't like those colors, so I decide to change them.
Of course he doesn't.
And then I'll pick a color like a green that it calls for one green, and I decided to use a different green, and it starts stitching, and I'm into it just a little bit, and I realized I don't really like that green. It's not dark enough, right?
Yeah. So that's a good reason
I'll back
for
it
changing.
up and pick a darker green.
Yeah, you don't have to start all over again.
And just start stitching over top of it.
And it will. If you have something go wrong with your satin stitch, now this is rare, shouldn't be a problem, but let's say you got overzealous with a bird's nest and you cut some thread on the back and it made some of your satin stitch on the top unwind. Okay, back it up to the point where the satin stitch is secure and just redo that section again. And yes, it's going to be a satin stitch over top of satin stitch. Doesn't look any different. No one's going to know, and it can do it. So you don't have to start all over again. All right, another thing, and actually I think I mentioned it. You probably heard me mention it in the video you just saw. Because I did something that you should never do, and I'm bad. I do it all the time, and you shouldn't do this. When you first start stitching, you're going to have a thread tail come up to the top. After it's done a few stitches, stop the machine, lift up the presser foot, and snip that stitch off. Carefully, don't snip the stitches that have already been stitched into it. Then drop the presser foot, restart the machine. Why? Well, let me tell you. You could sew through your finger. If you're doing this real close while it's going down and it suddenly decides to take a turn in a direction you weren't expecting when your finger's there, yeah. Okay, knock wood. I have never stitched my finger. And I don't think I'd want to, because I think that would be very, very horrible. But what I have done is I've gotten a little close to the needle with my scissors, cutting that thread while it's still sewing around, and it made a little turn that I wasn't expecting, hit the edge of my scissors, and bingo, needle breaks. Okay? And worse, what can happen with that is if that really jams down, it can throw the machine out of alignment for that project. Throw the hoop out of alignment, and then you'll have to start over again. So get into the habit. I know it's a bit of a pain. You figure, well, we're in a roll here. Let's see, it's just moving over there. Okay, I can trim the thread there. Don't risk it. Don't risk it. It's a safety issue, actually, more than anything else. Now, mind you, I have let the machine run, and my thread that I want to cut is way up here, and the needle's way down there, and it's not coming up for a while. So, I played a little chicken with it. But when it's really, and I don't recommend you do that either. So do as I say, not as I do. Okay? Don't try this at home. I'm a professional, or at least play one on YouTube. Okay. What were the other things? Okay, stabilizer. Now, I think I've mentioned it in the video what stabilizer we're using, but we'll go over it again. We are using several layers of water-soluble stabilizer. How many layers you're going to say? Okay, the very first piece I did it on 2 layers of water-soluble stabilizer. But I looked at it and realized that there was a little puckering around on some of the stitches. And when you see that, stop your machine, cut your thread with your thread cutter, get out 2 more layers of water-soluble stabilizer, and just float it under your hoop, and then carry on from where you left off. because if you don't have enough stabilizer, there's nothing there to support. The stitches are going to pull in, and you'll see it. Don't be cheap with your stabilizer. And also take a look at the number of stitches that your project is, what you're stitching out. Like, my rule of thumb is usually 1 layer of stabilizer for every 8 to 10,000 stitches, up to a maximum of 4 layers. After that, it's just overkill, most of it. That's my general rule. Sometimes I don't need to do that many. It depends on the pattern and everything. But yeah, that's how many I use. And we're using water soluble for 2 reasons. First of all, in the instructions we went over last week with them, they wanted you to use some kind of a foam stabilizer in the layers to make the pieces stand up, because this is a 3-dimensional project, right? You'll see that next week when we put it together. You don't need that. If you use water-soluble stabilizer, essentially what water-soluble stabilizer is glue in a sheet form. It is not a fabric. It's a sheet of glue that looks like fabric.
Well, some people will argue that it's
Yes,
not
I know.
glue. It's some other.
We've had this argument before.
I can't remember what it is. It begins with a P. It's a substance.
It's a
and
poly.
It's technically not glue. It is a type of dissolvable plastic, I guess. if you
Yeah,
wanna call it
okay.
that. Polymer or something
Yeah.
like that.
All right. So we're calling it glue. All right.
PVA or something.
Yeah,
or
something like that. I don't know. Whatever. But we use the number of layers I told you. Then when you wash it out, I put it, and you saw it on the video, I put it in a basin of water in the bathroom, actually, because we have a little bathroom just around the corner here. So I just pour water into, like, run water into the basin, like pull up the stopper kind of a thing, so it's filling up. Plunge it in. I do it while the water's still running, actually, and I count to 30. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, okay, like 30 seconds roughly, and you'll watch it. And any of the stabilizer on the edges, you'll see it start to float away, and at first it'll be strands, but they dissolve into the water. And then I just swish it around. Now, here's the key to keep your pieces stiff. The more water-soluble stabilizer you rinse out, the limper your pieces are going to go. So I just do it until I see no more stabilizer around the edges. I pick it out of the sink, and then I go over, I put it through between a couple layers of paper towels, and I take my steam iron, and I give it a bit of a press, just lightly.
Yeah. And when you pull out your stuff, it still feels like there's stabilizer on it.
It should feel like that.
But it's not on the edges.
No, and you don't see it anymore. It's bond it with the fabric, basically. Saturate the fabric that you've used. So then I lay it down on a flat surface, and I just let it air dry. And it usually dries within about an hour or so. But that will make the piece stiff. So here. That's very stiff. That's very stiff. That is not limp. That is stiff. That's all that's in this, is the water-soluble stabilizer. That's it, in all the pieces. And next week we'll show you putting it together, but these all are stiff. If you rinse it all out, you're going to have this bleh. And that is probably one of the reasons why they're telling people in the instructions we went over last week to use this foam stabilizer, this thin foam. You don't need it. It's an added expense that you do not need. So yeah, we tell you that. Okay. If you don't trust us on that, well, you're idiots. But because this is the way we've done them all. Never had a problem with that. Okay. Now,
and the other reason is that these companies are trying to sell you
they're trying to sell you more product, and they're making the project even more involved.
Or the other thing is that people may have complained that they can't get these projects together because they've rinsed too much.
They've rinsed out too much stabilizer. Some people, I do not recommend this. Do not throw them in your washing machine at all, for several reasons. The washing machine is really going to rinse out all your stabilizer for sure. However, it could also wreck some of your stitching with it too, because there's no support left except for and if anything had done had stitched a little off or something like that. There's nothing to hold it. Don't do that. Do it in a basin of water. The bathroom sink is the best thing for that. Could be a kitchen sink, could be a laundry tub. It could just be a little pan of
Yeah.
water, whatever, with it. And the water temperature, I just lukewarm.
Lukewarm, yeah.
You don't need it scalding hot or anything like that. Like if you can't put your hands in it, it's too hot. Okay, that kind of thing, and it'll come up. Now Walter wants to tell you though something that he does.
Well, yeah, no, that's something I did with another project.
Okay, we're not doing it with this project, but there will be pieces in some of these. This is a gingerbread windmill, so it's like a house or whatever. They have this. This is a bottom piece. It has a hole in it because the idea is you can put a little tea light, a battery-operated tea light, not a flaming one, up into it to give it a nice little glow. And so this is your base piece. So you might want, now I never have, but Walter has, so explain.
Well, no, not necessarily in that piece, but like I did what do you call it? A nutcracker. And it had a platform where the nutcracker sits on. And one of the instructions on there was to use some of this stiff foam or something, because the base of the nutcracker, where the feet stood on top, was I didn't think it had enough support. So what I did was I used some Peltex, which is stuff I use in the bottom of a bag or something, or you could use a piece of cardboard too or something like that, right? And basically it's what's Peltex is this really thick stuff. It's like a foam.
Oh, okay.
Right? And it
I thought they called that Deckelbond.
No.
Okay.
Peltex is stiffer than that.
All right, fine. I stand corrected.
It feels like cardboard, actually. So it feels like a really stiff piece of cardboard, right? And but it's fusible, and I've stuck it onto the bottom of something that I needed more support.
Now you didn't sew it. You did that after the piece was sewn.
After the piece, after piece was done.
Yeah.
I because it's fusible, right?
Yeah.
So I just fused it to the back, and if you need more stiffness or something on a piece, you could do that, or you could take a piece of cardboard and just stick it to the bottom or something.
Now, I have never done that, and I've never had any problem. However, here's something I just thought of. So you're rinsing it out, and the phone rings, and you pick it up, and you're talking to Gladys for half an hour, and you went, oh, shit, I've left that piece in the sink, and you've taken it out, and it's like, very limp, and you let it dry, and it's just no good. Do you have to redo a piece? No. What you can do is take some of your stabilizer, some of your scraps. You can save your scraps. People do. I don't, but some people do. And just put a little bit of water in the bottom of the basin, put those scraps in, let them dissolve, plunge the piece back in there, swish it around for a moment, pull it out, and let it dry, air dry. It'll stiffen it back up because you're putting that stabilizer back into it in liquid form. So you can do that if you over rinse it. But like I said, 30 seconds is all it takes. Swish it around, take it out. Okay, and then let it dry.
Yeah, but for the most part, any of these houses, I've never used any kind of Peltex. The nutcracker is the only thing I ever used it on. But, I mean, there is a way to make your pieces a little stiffer if you have to.
Now, you will notice on this piece and on some of the other pieces this happens too. You'll see some threads. See that little thread at the top of that knob there, and there's some off the side? Is that going to cause you a problem? No. You can trim them, but be very careful with that if that happens. It's basically, it's probably some of the fibers from the fabric fraying. And it's not going to bother you in the final piece because a lot of these pieces, because it's an edge, it gets buried in with the other pieces. But you can just take a pair of scissors and just give it a light trim. Just don't cut into your satin stitches, because if you do that, then you do have to remake the piece, because there's no coming back from that. Okay, so I can't think of any other tips and tricks. Corey, can you think of any? All right, next week we're going to assemble it. I'm not sure how that's going to look. We'll work on it together. We will be using some special tools called hemostats for this. Hemostats are, well, these are the hemostats I will be using. These are called alligator hemostats.
Actually, I don't think I have a pair of those. I think those are the ones I use.
That's why they're called alligator. What? These are the ones you use?
Yeah, I think you're the only one that have a set. I don't think I have a set of those.
Oh. Well, anyways, where do you get these? You can get them online from the embroidery from OESD, or you can go on Amazon and get them. They're called hemostats, alligator hemostats. If you have a surplus store near you that sells, army surplus or medical surplus stuff like that, you can pick these up cheap. They're not usually very expensive. They're going to save you a lot of hell, as you will see next week when you're working with it. There's also something called alligator clips. Walter doesn't use them. And you can use other types of clips too, but we'll show you how we use those, or, well, in that case, me.
Well, I might use them. I'm not sure.
With that, these are also great if you got nose hair. Right. But we're not doing that on camera. So yeah, this is what we'll be using next week, and we will be using a little fabric glue as well. It's optional, but we'll explain next week why I prefer to use fabric glue with it rather than not. So that's next week. We're going to put the whole thing together and we will have a gingerbread windmill. So if you have questions, you can put them in the comments below or send me an email and we'll be happy to answer them to the best of our ability. But please don't ask us the question we've already answered on the video. I hate that. Pay attention, people. Really. Okay. So yeah, that's it. Any final words? Nope. Okay. So we'll see you next week for the final product.
Yeah.
Putting it together. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.